Welcome into the Thunder basketball universe. I don't know if you can believe it, but it is March 1st right now. And so the Thunder has completed February. We are now in month 6 of this season, which is just crazy to think about. And so we're going to take a step back. We're going to look back on this month of February that had a little bit of everything. And we thought, who better to help break down all of these fun storylines than our very own Chris Fisher. So you might recognize this voice on this podcast today. Chris, thanks for being here.
They might. It might sound a little different. I don't have the headset on to kind of get me in the mode.
You don't have 18,000 people you're screaming over during a game.
But thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
This is great because we have so much to look back on. I mean, obviously it was All-Star during February. We had a little bit of a fake spring in February, a couple of days where it was really warm here in Oklahoma City. The Thunder played really well, 8-3 during the month. They've now played 58 games this season, just 24 left. And so I know you've got a couple of things that made you look during this month. So since you were our guest, I'll let you go first. What made you look during this month of February, Chris?
I feel like there was a lot in the month.
Yeah.
When you think back to pre-All-Star break, getting the close on January. Anytime you close a month, it feels like an accomplishment. You're like, okay, what's in store for the next month? How many games are there? How many times are we on the road? But February was, even though there was only 11 games, it felt busy with All-Star break being kind of right in the middle of it. But I have to go back to a game post All-Star break. This was in Houston not that long ago, the first of two. And Houston had been a team that had been giving the Thunder some issues, particularly at the Toyota
Houston.
Center. They took the Thunder down earlier in the season. And in that first game, Chet Holmgren didn't play maybe his best. He had only 4 points, and we've seen him respond really well. And what made me look was the beginning of that fourth quarter. And you and I were kind of talking off air before we were coming on here. Just what he did in the first minute and 20 seconds of that fourth quarter was incredible. We were looking at the play-by-play, and I don't want to get it wrong. And this is where I can look down in my little cheat sheet here. But he had, in the first minute and 7 seconds of the fourth quarter, he had an alley-oop, he had a block, he had an offensive rebound, a putback, and a three.
He was all
that is
over the floor.
One-man takeover, and it was impossible to miss. You had to see it, and it kind of changed the whole trajectory of the game. The Thunder had control at that point, took the lead, never looked back, and it's a good embodiment, a good example of Chet and his ability to respond. And there's been times where, he's looked like a rookie, where he's been in a situation that he might not have been in, or a matchup that he's facing for the first time. But it seems like every single time he goes up against that particular matchup or that opponent or that scheme for the second time, there's improvement, and he had a huge game. But that minute and 7 second stretch, impossible to miss. It's still stuck in my mind.
It's a great one because it stuck out in my mind too. And I remember very vividly writing in my notes, I think Houston called a very quick timeout early in that fourth quarter because of Chet's kind of explosion there. And I remember writing in my notes, Chet Holmgren 14 points in the opening of the fourth quarter. And I was just like marveling at his ability to do a little bit of everything. And this is what we've seen from Chet all season long. He's got 17 double-doubles this season, which is a Thunder rookie record. And this is a reason why. He finished this game with 29 points, 8 rebounds, 7 assists, which is something that kind of popped for me in this game for Chet, just because we obviously see the scoring, we see the rebounding, we see the blocks, but those assist numbers, I think that just goes to show that he's really able to impact a game on several different levels.
I don't know about you, but he has just blown me away with what he's been able to do in a short amount of time on both ends of the floor. And there's a lot of players out there who are making plays. Shea's having an incredible season. J-Dub has taken his game to another level. But seeing the versatility that you're talking about, the understanding of how to play within what the Thunder are trying to do, the sort of defensive shrewdness that he's got, and having going through it for the first time, but still able to make these impact-type plays with how the Thunder want to play. If they're getting stops and they're getting out on the run and they're making defensive plays, that's when they're at their best. And he's a big part of that in anchoring the defense, particularly at the rim with how opponents are trying to attack the Thunder. And he has just turned himself into a wall. But it's just so fun to watch because he's such a grinder. He's a basketball intellect at heart. He wants to study the game. And then you combine that with his competitive fire, and you see what we've been seeing. And it was kind of interesting because they were asking him recently, and I think this was before the game last night against San Antonio, or after the Houston game, one of the two, one of his media availabilities, and he was asked, how do you feel this being, your rookie year, and are you going through the rookie, the rookie wall at all? And he said, look, it's not January anymore. And we're all happy that it's not January anymore.
Everyone understood exactly what he meant.
Exactly. And he's got vitamins back in his socks now, and he's back to playing well, but he's getting better and better. He's getting more comfortable, and seeing that growth as the season has gone on is a testament to him and his ability, but also his commitment to be getting better. And it's starting to show up in games more and more. And he's a problem for opponents.
I love that you talk about just his growth and development over the course of the season, because Coach Dagnall, we've heard several times talk about the fact that he's a basketball junkie, and the questions are nonstop. It's an endless conversation with Chet, and that explains why we've seen just this steady growth. And every time he sees a team multiple times, the second time is typically a better outcome for Chet and just his performance out there on the floor. So that makes a lot of sense with what we're seeing from Chet this season.
I feel like I took all of the sort of the Chet block here from you, Paris, but I know that we're not quite done with him.
We're not, because here's my made you look. It is Chet related. It's Chet related, but it's more than just Chet. So let me just set the scene here. You talked about the first Houston game. I'm going to go back to the second Houston game in Oklahoma City. Obviously, a win for the Thunder. Really fun game in Paycom Center. The environment was super loud. You can just tell everybody was super into it. And this play had a lot to do with it. So J-Dub comes off a ball screen at the top of the key. He's kind of surveying the floor. He's looking to see what he's got. He's kind of looking around. And he throws the ball up to the front of the rim. And Chet Holmgren, facing J-Dub at the top of the key, grabs the ball and reverse dunks it. And then we all remember this play. And I remember thinking, that's new. We haven't seen that before. And then we go to San Antonio, and J-Dub throws another lob.
They do it in back-to-back games.
Back-to-back games. He throws another lob to Chet Holmgren, and he reverse dunks it. Two things in my brain. One, Mark Dagnall has told us that the Thunder has emphasized lobs recently, because especially if teams are going to switch, that element of, vertical spacing and just kind of stretching the floor out a little bit more is a really good threat for the Thunder to have. And I'm like, were the lobs to the reverse dunk part of the development plan here?
Is that part of practice?
Right. Are they out there like, how many different versions of this lob can we put together? And secondly, after that Houston game, the first time we saw it, I asked J-Dub, I was like, did you expect Chet to reverse dunk it when you threw it? He was like, look, I wasn't expecting him to dunk it like that, but it was a perfect lob. That was the best lob we've had all year. It would have been really hard to mess up that dunk. I imagine there was a little bit of sarcasm in his voice.
First of all, I asked Michael Cage on air when we saw it.
Yeah.
I think it was last night against San Antonio when they did it the second time.
Yeah.
I said, I don't think that people realize how hard it is to, first of all, dunk a basketball and then reverse.
Yeah.
And then to do it on an alley-oop. That takes the difficulty to a whole different level.
With defense. In live action. Yes.
It is really, really hard. And he makes it look effortless. And I was like, that's impressive. Because you don't see that. An alley-oop reverse, like you might have seen that in the 90s when they used to do a lot of creativity.
Yeah.
You don't see that now. It's 2024. Doesn't exist in the NBA. But those two have a heck of a connection going.
They do.
And it is fun to watch because they handle that sort of early second quarter, early fourth quarter unit. And whatever they got going on, keep doing it.
Yeah.
Because they've got a connection. They've got the chemistry. And J-Dub's lob last night over Wembanyama.
Yep.
And they made it look like they've been working on that like it was nothing in the backyard.
That ball almost touched the rafters. Like it had to get so high up there. Yeah.
So ridiculously high. And they make it look easy. And what a great connection those two have. And I want to see more.
I
I'm like, when's the next one coming?
I mean, at this rate, the next game probably. But as much as those plays were about Chet, it was also about J-Dub, because this season, or this month in particular, he's averaging a career high in assists per game as well. And so his facilitating has been up, and clearly he's added a little razzle-dazzle to this as well with that connection with Chet.
I thought that you asked a question before the game yesterday that I thought was really interesting, and it was about J-Dub and his playmaking. And Mark Dagnall said, he can even be more aggressive.
Still.
I was surprised.
Still.
Right?
Yeah, because we heard this last year about J-Dub, about how his teammates, his coaches, they're like, he's such a functional player. He's such a good system player that we have to tell him, like, hey, go hunt for your advantages. Go get your shot. Go look for your opportunities. And now he's above 20 points a game. And they're like, yeah, you could still be a little more aggressive.
There's a lot more in that tank. There's a lot more in that tank, and there's a lot more growth. There's a lot more creativity, and he's got a little bit of flair, but you combine that with the confidence, and then you start to see more and more what he's capable of. And I think that there's a lot more in there.
Isn't that exciting to think about? Like what we've seen from J-Dub, from Chet, from Shea so far, and then remembering that these guys are still young and still early on in their careers, and there's still so much in the tank to be offered.
So much more to go. And what we're seeing from them is clearly good, solid, fundamental basketball within what the Thunder are trying to do. But you see the individualism at times and the creativity and what they both bring. And I think that that's what makes it fun to watch on a nightly basis.
So fun to watch. As a matter of fact, it's so fun to watch. You know, we've talked about it. How about we run those plays back with our very own Chris Fisher on the call for those plays? All right, we'll take a look at those plays when we come back.
Visually better than audio.
When we come back, we're breaking down February.
One of the reasons why they play great defense, shutting down the fast break opportunities for the Rockets. And right out of the gate here in the fourth quarter, it's a lob to Holmgren for the alley-oop. Something that the Thunder prioritized if the matchup is right. Thompson tried to get Holmgren in the air. Didn't matter as he still laid him up. Another block for Chet Holmgren. Hayward, off-balance shot, offensive rebound. Holmgren's put back. That's going to drop in. Holmgren again from the outside, as this time he bombs a three.
And that's what he's been able to do with the veteran leadership that they brought in. Oh, my goodness. Holmgren on the reverse rack attack.
You know, I'm amazed sometimes when I see certain plays. And those two plays were amazing.
There they go again. This time another reverse slam on the alley-oop.
All right, since we've wrapped up February, and no, it wasn't quite as action-packed as January was with
That's
those,
a good thing.
what was that, 19 games? 17, so sorry, it felt like 19. 17 games in February, or in January. February did have a lot to offer, and there's still a lot of storylines to break down. And so, Chris, I want to throw this to you. What are some of the major themes from February that stood out to you?
I think on the back end of how busy January was, you get to February and there's kind of a sense of relief almost. And like I said, you finish a month like that, there's a sense of accomplishment. But at the same time, you're really thinking about All-Star break because you're past the halfway point of the season. You're right around game 50 and you can kind of see that break. And boy, is it right there. And you just want to dive right in. You want to get to warm weather.
Yep.
You want to start getting some days off. You want to mentally release from basketball. And the Thunder did not do that. And I think back to those two games right before the All-Star break that really stood out to me that I thought was a testament to the maturity of them and their growth as a young unit. Because if you think back to the Sunday, it was February 11th, it was Super Bowl Sunday. The day before against Dallas, they got worked over pretty good. And Dallas took it to them, scored a ton of points. That was on a 2 o'clock start time.
That's right.
But the next day, the very next day, which was the final home game before the All-Star break, they were going up against Sacramento. And this was a Sacramento team that had just given the Thunder fits. Tormented them the last couple of years. They won 8 consecutive games. Just could not figure them out.
Yeah.
And so then you combine that with the All-Star break is looming. It's a back-to-back. You're going back home. It's another early start time, 2 p.m. You got the Super Bowl that day. All these things that could have just pulled you in a million different directions. And you end up playing a really good game. To the point that Sacramento really never stood a chance in the second half. You cut off De'Aaron Fox, played incredible defense on him, and he had really giving you problems. I remember back to the game in Sacramento, I think he put up 43 points. And the Thunder came out with a pretty solid victory in that afternoon. But they still had one more game.
Yep.
And that was in Orlando. Long trip, one game. That's the final game before the All-Star break.
Yeah.
TNT, All-Star festivities looming. And
Shaq getting his jersey
Shaq
retired.
Getting his jersey retired. And Orlando is having a much better season this year than they have in years past. They're a good defensive team. They have Paolo Banchero. And the Thunder came out and really controlled that game from start to finish, got into a good rhythm, and finished the pre-All-Star break incredibly strong. That kind of gave them momentum, which is why we saw them win 6 in a row. But that to me was a sign of growth. It was a sign of maturity. You love the approach. Yeah, you love the mentality that they had in those 2 games, making the adjustments. And I think that's one thing that carried over into the start post-All-Star break.
Yeah.
But it stood out to me as one of the high points of the month, no doubt.
Those 2 games were a candidate for Made You Look for me for a very random reason.
I hope I didn't steal it.
No, not at all. Both of those games, the Thunder won with the exact same score. The 127-113 against the Kings, 127-113 against the Magic.
I didn't know that.
And I just thought that was wild. I've never seen that before. So that was a candidate for Made You Look. But to your point, the focus and the discipline and the poise of this young group, especially in that Magic game when there are just so many potential distractions surrounding that game. It's the last game before the All-Star break, like you mentioned. Shaq's walking around the building. People are following him around, and TNT is there. And there could have been just a lot of reasons to just be like, we're going to kind of mail it in, see what happens, and just get me to the All-Star break. And they didn't do that.
Well, there's a mental aspect to it as well. When you're playing on TNT and it's national TV, you could kind of be like, well, I want to show what we're capable of doing. You can get out of yourself a little bit.
Yeah.
They haven't had a ton of these national games over the last couple of years. They're starting to get a little bit more. And Mark Daigneault always says you got to earn those for the best teams in the league. But you can kind of get into your own a little bit and say, I want to show what everybody what I can do. And there wasn't even a hint of that.
Not at all. And especially the offense took care of itself, I felt like, but it was the defensive focus, especially against Sacramento, a team that is so potent offensively. You've got Domantas Sabonis, like you mentioned, De'Aaron Fox, 2 guys who can absolutely light it up and combine for 75 points easily. But the Thunder were so disciplined, especially in their game plan against De'Aaron Fox. I felt like Lou Dort did a fantastic job.
It was incredible.
It's just so easy to take for granted what Lou Dort does defensively. But he was all over De'Aaron Fox, making every shot super difficult, super tight-knit 5-man defense. And holding the Kings to 113, that's a win. That is a major win in itself. And the Thunder just showing such great poise yet again. For one of they're not the second youngest team in the NBA anymore. I can't say that anymore. I think they're 5th now. They're
4th or 5th, somewhere around there. But
with the new additions on the
Gordon
roster,
kind of bumped them up a little bit, bringing the average up.
He did. Still a young team, a very young team, but showed a lot of poise in those moments to be able to get the job done. All right, Fish. You said you had another thing that stood out to you during the month of February. Was there anything else?
I would defer to you on All-Star break. I know that you were feet on the ground there, but
I did.
I know you have something that stood out to you.
I did. The All-Star break was great. We had a whole podcast recapping the All-Star break. So if you haven't watched it, go back and look. There's a lot of fun elements to our time in Indianapolis. Snowy Indianapolis, I would add. Mine is about the Thunder's shooting percentage from the 3-point line. This has been something that the Thunder's been top of the league really all season long in 3-point shooting around 39% from 3. And they've been about, I think it's like 0.5 ahead of the Minnesota Timberwolves or something like that. Yeah, Minnesota's number 2. Well, during the month of February, they shot 42.7% from 3, which incredible. And as we know from Coach Daigneault, like shooting is the most volatile thing in the NBA. No matter what you do, you can control everything you can control. And sometimes the ball just might not bounce your way. And that's just how that's basketball. But what I noticed during this month in particular, the Thunder shot the ball incredibly well, but this was a result of them getting good shots and putting themselves in the position. So if the ball did bounce their way, it was gonna go through the hoop, and they were getting themselves good looks, open looks, quality looks, and it was just coming within the flow of the offense. And multiple guys, you had Chet Holmgren, Lou Dort, you had SGA shooting well from three. I mean, he had 4 threes in that game against Houston the other night. And everyone,
season high, by the way.
Season high, exactly. Yeah. Every single guy I felt like was really chipping in and shooting the ball really well during this month.
I thought last night in the game against San Antonio, there was a cluster of examples back to back to back, and it came in the second half with SGA facilitating things, and there were, I want to say, 3 consecutive possessions where he drove down the lane, kicked the ball out to the sideline right in front of San Antonio's bench, and you had Cason Wallace, Jalen Williams, and it might have been 2 Jalen Williams shots, and they were all misses. But you're thinking to yourself, that's exactly the shot that you want,
right?
Because they're normally, you want to be taking wide open shots. And those are shots that clearly Cason Wallace can hit. He's been over 40% over the course of the year. And Jalen Williams can hit that too. You live with those all day long.
Exactly.
All night long. And to your point, those are the kind of looks they've been generating all season long. And you've got guys who are benefiting from it. Shea, he can get his shot anywhere, but he's bumped up to about 38%. Chet's been over 40%. Lou Dort was smoking hot in the month of February.
Incredible. Yep.
He can get going. He has his highs and his lows. Cason's been pretty consistent, but it's all a part of how they want to play offense.
And a couple of things. So today at practice, we actually had a chance to talk to Coach Dagnall about this, and he brought up a couple of really interesting factors that the Thunder considers when they deem what they would deem a quality look, a quality shot, something that they want. And he was referring back to the San Antonio game, and he was like, there were probably about 12 looks that we would consider kind of lower, subpar shots for us. And I asked him, okay, what goes into a subpar shot? And he mentioned several different, and this just goes to show just how many variables go into shooting. A, contestedness. B, the person who's shooting and where they're shooting it. And obviously shot clock, like all of that stuff plays an element in the quality of a shot. And throughout the month of February, the Thunder was able to generate really high quality looks in terms of their contestedness. Guys were shooting open ones. The right guys were shooting the right shots. And Coach Dagnall was saying, we really try to educate guys on which shots are best for them to take. And he gave the example, like Isaiah Joe, anything he throws up, that is a pretty quality look. So, we'll live with that.
Anywhere on the floor.
Green light, my guy. You are good to go. But they try to educate guys on which shots are their most highest quality, highest percentage expectancy shot. And the guys have been really leaning into that and buying into that and making sure they're generating those looks out there on the floor.
It just sounds like trying to put guys in positions to be successful.
Exactly.
And that they're comfortable with. And predictability, that word that we've heard so much from the coaching staff, predictability to not only help the individuals, but to help the function of the offense.
Yeah.
And I think that it's not just the month of February too, Paris. Like they've been generating
definitely
the shots that they want all season long, and it's not something that we've heard much griping about at all.
And that's a really good point to point out. Like the Thunder's been shooting the ball well in February, 42.7%, which is 3 percentage points ahead of the next team in line. So that's a really good point. But all season long, top of the league in this category, and it's because they buy into these controllable elements of shooting the ball, and it has served them pretty well, and all the guys out there on the floor pretty well as well. All right, so that's a look back on February. Now we have March ahead of us, and the Thunder hits the ground running. So we're back right now from San Antonio. This could have been an easy 4-game road trip.
Roadie, right?
Yeah, 4-game road trip, because the Thunder was in San Antonio last night. We're here in Oklahoma City. No games in OKC. We're going to ship out. We're going to go to Phoenix to play the Suns. And then that starts a back-to-back where we end up in Los Angeles.
A nice little 3 and 4.
Yeah.
But it's always nice to come home, like regroup.
I like that.
Repack.
Yeah. Very necessary.
Yes. The packing part of it, like January, I literally wore the same thing. The entire month.
I left my suitcase in my room. I just left it there.
Left it there.
Yeah.
Would do the laundry, put the exact same clothes back in, go back out on another road trip. So being able to come back and like just reset the whole packing situation.
Yep.
And your suits, like not having to bring 4 suits or 4 outfits.
Big difference.
Is significant.
It's a big difference.
I can't even tell you how big of a difference it is. So being able to come home is nice. Like it allows you to kind of mentally reset before we go back out tomorrow. to Phoenix. So we got Phoenix, LA, and then Portland, and then flying back from Portland and landing at about 4 o'clock in the morning. But that's a nice way to kick off the month of March.
And
a warm welcome.
A very warm welcome to this meteorological spring that we're stepping into. I think I said that wrong.
You've been leaning into
I'm trying.
Leap year yesterday.
I did.
You're leaning into March. You're leaning into spring.
I'm just turning into the weatherman out
here. Exactly. We're going to get a Paris Lawson weather report mid-game coming up.
My next first quarter hit, going to weather report from Miami. All right, so the Thunder, as we mentioned, 3-game road trip to start the month of March, and then a really nice homestand, Fish. I think it's 4 games here inside of Paycom Center, and we'll be here for about 8 days, which will be a really nice little respite from the travel that we've had.
It's always nice to just be able to settle down and know that I'm going to be home for a while, even though you've got those games. You got an off day pretty much after every single one, and then you've got that single game in Memphis, and then you need to come back home for 3 off days. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I believe. Then you got another home game before you got to go back out on the road. So it's got a little bit of everything. There's no doubt about it. They've got another road trip, a 3-game road trip toward the end of March, which I believe is Toronto, which going north of the borders always got its own difficulties and logistics. Milwaukee, and then a back-to-back with the Pelicans.
Yeah, New Orleans right after that. So it'll be a really good stretch, and it's just crazy to think that there are 24 games left in this season. We're gonna blink, and the regular season will be done.
It feels like yesterday was November.
I just can't believe we've been playing basketball for 6 months now of this season. Yeah, it feels like it was October yesterday.
It's going by quickly, and it's going to go by quickly. This month's going to fly by. Before you know it, we're going to be in April. But there's a good balance. It doesn't feel dense in one area over another. It feels like kind of one of those normal months where you split the time between the road and home, and you can kind of catch your bearings here and there. And
not too many back-to-backs.
Not too many, not 5 back-to-backs.
That was fun.
Which we love back-to-backs.
It's so fun. But yeah, a really good balance, and I really think there's a lot of really good games in here too. I mean, even this back-to-back just to start off the month of March here with the Phoenix LA trip here.
It's a tough one.
That'll be a really good test for this group just to start this month off, and you can catch it all on Bally Sports Oklahoma. Our very own crew, Chris Fisher, Michael Cage, myself, and Nick Gallo, bringing you all the action on the road. Well, Fish, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Love coming in here. This has been fun.
This is
we'll
great.
Have to do it again.
We'll have to bring you back, Fish. Friend of the pod at this point.
Always.
All right. And thank you so much for watching and listening. Be sure to like, rate, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you so much to our producer, Matt Bishop. And until next time, Thunder up and catch you later.